any kind of building, when we has to exist into the essentiality of this particular physical world, yes, it needs to interact with the site. It needs to have a community to respond to. It needs to have taken care of economy, and which in our cases becomes a very important parameter of how we look at how this entire architectural expression has to find its right economy. It's always about environment, how we could do it. So when we talk about resonance, it's about somewhere in between where we can blend what these existential parameters and blend something together to form what we call as a sort of a resonance, where it is more than what the parts were made out of. That's what a resonance means. It's more than what the initial input is. That's what it could be more. So our take on what we call it as a street smart architecture. What exactly is something what we call as street smart? Because many times when we started as a young practice, we always had a bigger parameter to address. That was always the cost. I mean that in a regular project with a regular mindset and regular budget, how can we create something which is something that could make us feel that it is being pushed from out of a comfort zone to create something which was not it's what was expected or something more out of it. So this was one of our very earlier projects. And why I bring it up this is where we had faced certain challenges where we thought of, okay, what could be possible. So when we were, so the idea of it is like it's a kind of an adaptive reuse, wherein like we had 2 old industrial sheds and it was being converted to a factory where the factory was always operating and they had to have a facelift for it. And in this, the challenge was when it came to us as a brief, the brief was in simple one line. We want a nice building, but the only thing is that we want to do it in the most cost-effective way we could be. And the first thing that they suggested, let's do something in something like a composite panel or a glass something. But it was a south facade. It was very brutal for it to just paste something in. What we thought, like, what could we do something which could be more that could address the context more better, was like, what if we could change something which was kind of a glass to something which was more breathable, so it can take away the element of it. And we thought of various ways how to bring the cost down to one of the point where it was also about to get those panels made into the factory itself. That made it cost effective. It was also, and it was facing on a very kind of a disused urban plaza. So if you look at the context of it, it was like where you can see the industrial warehouses, a lot of things that were laid onto the industry sites. Something that was not very exciting to look at, because there always, when you look into industry areas, it's like there's a lot of amount of negativity that flows into it. How do we break that thing to bring something more like a kind of an urban acupuncture, where do something good where it can spread easily to people? And that's what it happened. Like today, for example, fast tracking to around 8 to 10 years, this thing is a marquee for this plaza, and the wayfinding actually happens with this particular building. So that is something that probably could have added value. And it was also about when we when we were doing it, it was a very long facade and it was a very narrow road. And it would have a very long facade and a narrow road. The challenge was, how do we create impressions? Because nowadays, with the advent of technology, we do a lot of things, but many a times it's always about how experientially we can take it. How would we give the sense of arrival experience? And what would be the cone of vision where we can actually perceive it and appreciate it? So that's where we looked at it, where it could be broken, fractal, at the same time being interesting. And this was done in like simple fiber panels that could be kept onto it. So this was the whole way how it came up. There were traditional buildings where we had a structure, a kind of a more breathable structure, an expanded metal mesh, and over and above we have these artistically articulated panels that blend into it. So that was one example where we looked at how we can push our boundaries, look at the cost and see what we can do. And this was one project where it was where we had an emotional brief. So the idea was like, okay, this was a kind of a school which was there for almost for 4 decades, and this particular piece of bus was the first bus, and it was very close to the founder. And one of the second generation founder, the second generation of the founder told me like this was something that we bought out of our father's insurance money, and something that is special to us. So when we thought that, okay, what could be an afterlife and how could we do something which could create like interest and also a respect that it probably truly deserve. Though today they have hundreds of buses, but for them the first one is still more the special, and it's always like every one of us. So this was not exactly a project because we were doing quite a lot of work, and they said, can you look at something, do it into it. So then we thought of what probably we could create a small gallery space out of it. And here the idea was how could we have something that was not covered totally. We can take it off, we can keep the bus in its purest form and still do an intervention where we can make it useful for the school. It could have a small open air theatre, it could have a terrace on the top, because normally schools in this kind of areas are like, they are guarded with large walls, but they are surrounded with open fields. So, but students don't get to see the sense of those nice fields because generally they are guarded with walls. So that's the idea, to break it up where we can step it up. And these were how the initial interventions where we initially came up with an idea, like we were thinking to close it partially, completely, and then it slowly evolved and how it is what it is today. And even in a small like these were some of the structures that when we could rip it up, we could completely did the inside for it and maintaining the fractals. And also adjusting to the user cone of vision, where like it could freely flow into a space and still resonate with the original structure. So this is how, and how we think it's important, even like people who are non-architects, like they resonate with very well. And even like, I used to get sometimes photos from the staff of the school where they would say that, okay, this looks completely different today, because it's the way how the shadows have been played at different points in time. It looks very different because sometimes it starts looking more grey because of the shadows, sometimes it starts looking more white, and sometimes it's like pristine white. So it plays up in a certain way where it creates a lot of interest around people, and it is something that exists in space and time, and always is like a dynamic sculpture. So this project, more than a project, was something that was kind of a problem that we tend to solve. Was generally because where even like in many of the cultures, even today, like we have this situation that in a school, probably the washrooms are not the best. Many times, even like when I was a child in one of a school, I was even scared to go to a toilet because it was like, it felt like as if probably it's like a hellhole sort of an experience. But how do we change it? Then when we even went to this school, it actually had like, they had infrastructure, but the point is like, there was not care and attention that was given to run the infrastructure. And that's when we thought of, can we do a system where it is completely devoid of human intervention and can be bright, welcoming, and always, and without any kind of human intervention. So that was the initial idea that we wanted to do it. And the bigger problem with washrooms is predominantly we need to have proper forced ventilation, and we need to take off all the excess humidity that we have. So for that, what we thought was a simple concept of doing a stack ventilation with a forced ventilators, which are primarily driven by wind, and have direct skylights which can bring in a lot of heat, and it could rise up the air, heat up the space. It will be brighter. At the same time, it would heat up this entire space, and it would be continuously running. So for a school where probably washrooms would be used like 5 to 6 hours because it's a day school, but it would be 24 hours. It's just continuously working with it because it's open air fields. And so that was how like this was the whole idea, where we have increased the air volume by creating like around 15 feet on the sides. And so when the skylights come in, the heat would hit into the surface, and it would heat up the air, and it would rush through the external fins. And the resultant was, when you walk into it, it always feels as if it is fresh as outside. So that was something that it has completely changed the way, like that's what it technically doesn't need to run on electricity other than the head of the water that is needed. So this was an extension, and the overall element that how it has come up was like, it's really nice because we could also, by creating this skylights, we could bring in a lot of greenery from outside. We could see the sky view, and also it was conscious enough to push the urinals away from the main entrance so that it creates a nice welcoming area in the beginning as well. And so then when we, this was a time when we started experimenting, when we were working with thin concrete structures. Those were as thin as 50 when we first started. So if this was the one project where we were doing it for an office or an experience center for a person who was passionate about concrete or who does like really nice work. So we were trying to use the expertise and push the boundaries. And when we, this was like a kind of a concrete sculptural gallery with a circular space, and there was space around it. And so this entire space was more like, though it's an office, but it was more of an experience center than as an office. So that's how it was being built. And in this, like, we started learning to work with 2 thick concrete, where it was bending, twisting in both sides. And it was our initial experience when we started working with like non-rectilinear forms, where we could look at different methods of construction, because the kind of work that we do, it is both at the same time developed with like computationally. At the same time, it needs a lot of hands-on work. That's when we bring in, like, it's not computationally built yet. So that's when we have a kind of sense of it, and how we communicate these kind of structures to the site, and also to evaluate is also a bit critical. And if you see the bottom left image, it's about how it slowly bends into it, and then it comes back. And even when we were doing the front part of the entrance, which is in this, the whole idea was like we wanted to have an expansion, because it's an expanding contracting space. We wanted to have something that was flowing even in the roof level, and it was pretty. The difficult part was because we were dealing with, we wanted to do it in a very optimal and very budgeted cost. We were looking at materials and ways how to do it. And in the end, it was electrical conduit pipes that we cut them, 1,500 of them, cut into different lengths. And it was technically like it was a kind of an Excel calculations that was given to them, and they could cut each one of them. And it was literally, it was other than the manpower cost, it was literally like free, because the only thing is we wanted to do a end caps, we got it punched, and then we used a slider. So they're not lit, it gives an illusion of being lit, because we use them glossy end tips to make it give a feeling of an illusion. So this is a project where we try to explore the kind of thin concrete slabs onto the outside, to the elements. So when we were doing this project, it was one of the newer developments around Chandigarh region. And because we all know Chandigarh has a great history, but the only challenge is that the history that was there, maybe probably in the mid-60s and 70s, with the rapid expansion of the newer cities and newer neighborhoods, it was like any other city, and it was not being reflective of what it was truly meant for, and what it actually had, the roots of the newer city, what it was. So here it was an attempt to actually look at how we could reinterpret in a modern context, because we are also one of the city where we are highly guided by very stricter norms in terms of bylaws and in terms of everything, because they have bylaws for anything and everything what you can imagine, specifically the codes here, because you can imagine, like, the great capital complex was built, there were no bylaws, and then came the bylaws, and then it was something that was given to us. And everything that so here we had to reinterpret ways, we can't go back to the old ways of doing things. So this was an attempt where we could reinterpret the legacy of concrete and try something. So this was again subtractive in nature. It was deliberately subtracted volumes. And here we have 2 layers of one layer of concrete skin, which is as thin as 3 inches, which is going up. And over and above, there was another layer which interlaces into it, which is also holding up the original structure because of the wind and everything that needs to be taken care of. So when we were doing this was part of the newer development which was meant to be information technology and those kind of things. So because it was leading through a main highway, the idea was we wanted a brief was like how can we make it something which was visible from the main highway because it is quite far into it. So we made different tests in terms of how what big the size of the volume needs to be and how could we keep it in a way. So this was the extreme left was the initial idea where we wanted to be flowing with greenery on the top and to have like a free flowing element into it. Then because it was hugely regulated in terms of they literally define us the footprint, giving us what exactly the setbacks, volume and everything. So then the only thing that we are left up to play with is predominantly the vertical surfaces. In this case that where we could, because it's a building that was meant to be leased, it was not being occupied by the owner. So that's when it was a kind of a intervention. And these were how we could create it. The challenge was when we were doing an exposed surface like this where we were wanting to do it. It was doing with traditional tools and appliances, no special equipment that is being used. So it was critical also because most of the time we only could get to see it, what it was looking like only from the inside. Only when everything got opened up we could see what it was on the outside. And this is how the final output is. And with the people in there you can see the actual scale of it, how it flows and it blends into it. And this was something that was very easily recognizable, and it was very interesting because it was the verticality was also partially with the advent because it was a west facing facade wherein it was northwest where we could cut off a lot of heat from it. And again, bringing back to the emphasis, this was a standard regular building where they only wanted to, because it was for a rental purpose, it actually wanted, they could only want to spend what were the other buildings being spent. So it was not that we are working with extraordinary budgets to achieve this, it was simple materials, simple techniques that were being used to achieve something like this. And same thing with timberine. So timberine was something where we were asked for intervention to create a experience center for veneer. So we thought of doing several things, but what actually when we do one thing, because then again we said because okay, to do a lot of things and you need to spend a lot of them, can we do one thing which could completely change the experience of how people would walk into it. So this was considered as an immersive sculpture where we had like a ribbon structure that was going all around, doubly bent, and it was flowing even into the, like it becomes a seat somewhere, it becomes a table, it becomes a roof element. And so this is the overall method that we have used it. And the challenge was like when we had to fabricate it, here we made it with slices of timber where we could join them like plywood, like MDF plywood, where we would slice everything, each one of the fin, and when we sliced it, then we sliced it both ways. We could create, it's like a simple tongue and groove joint to create the skeleton. And then we had a factory that was doing extremely thin, doubly bent veneers that was done in a factory where they were developing. So it was in continuous rolls that we used it for wrapping up. So it was all the fabrication was done digitally. So all the thing that was done on site was to combine them together to wrap it up. That was those things that were done on site. And this was so initially when we had to present it to the client, we actually took up a 3D model and he was like pretty impressed with it, and he kept it for most of the project time. Then we said, okay, this is, and he was impressed even from the day when even it was not being built. People used to come, he used to show the model, and he used to be like, wow, this is something that is coming, really exciting. So because this continuous ribbon, these were some of the ways that we did was, and we could engrave all the details onto the cut sections itself, so it was easy for the people to do it. It was a two-way grid using alphabets and numbers on other side, where we could slice everything and then we have those rafters joined together. So that way we were able to create something that was fluid. These were one of the different steps that were being done, and then we carefully inserted supports that got into it. So this is the overall output where it completes. So because here, like some places, there were double bend structures, so we were looking at how ways we could create it. And so this was something that was really pushed ourselves, like where we could go ahead from tessellated geometries to go for fluidic geometries, and how we could evaluate, explore possibilities and interventions into standard real life projects. And this was the same time when we were looking to have those thin concrete structures, how we could create now three-dimensional structures blown into it. And this was one of an experience where we were, this was in a similar area where we were, now we were, when we did two-dimensional forms, we wanted to do three-dimensional ones as well. And we were, we had an idea what if we could create like elements which could be more dynamic, because this building was normally approached from one of the sides, so it looks very dramatic when you see it from the sides, and because it is very inviting for people to, and now there's a furniture gallery that is being used inside it, and they are pretty happy with how it is. So in this, because these were also two plots taken by the owner in a similar area that was primarily to rent, because they were rental buildings, they had a certain order and a certain discipline that has to be followed to maximize the lease space and everything. So in this, when we were looking for it, so this was, so what we tried doing it, because when it was a kind of a three-dimensional complicated structure, what we did was, what if we could create one set of, because then it was being built by standard tools and appliances. The only thing that was, when we were doing the box, we thought what if we could create one set or two sets of these modules, and then we keep rotating those modules to make it. So that way, when we could push our boundaries to do something in a standard budget, at the same time we could do something which was not just superficial, and it could blow into it. And at the same time, when they were looking to have like small window balconies into. So this is how it has come up, where it meets different laces into it and how it flows into it. So these are how it feels when you're inside, where he has the light playing. So this, when you look at the side sections, it looks pretty flowing, because it feels as if very unreal, and it has like really worked well for. And then we were doing this project which was for a school, and the school was there for around 30-40 years. It was a new campus for the school. And they said, like, now we, for the first time in 30 years, we actually got a space onto the highway, because we were always onto the inner road, and now somehow we could get into it. And we want this particular building to represent the time we are in, and at the same time it needs to draw attention for the people, because this is the time, like this is the small width and being a school building. So, and the function of this building was primarily, it had a small office on the ground floor, and the top it was predominantly a amphitheater that was there. So in this, where when everything is laid out, and we were walking about how we could bring in outside, and they had a requirement, like we had a staircase that leads from outside, we had a refugee terrace, because it was a school that didn't had a pre-function area separately, because it was a function would only happen, it would be used for an examination hall, different kind of, it was a multi-purpose hall that was there. So we had a refuge area on the right side, and this entire floor. And here in this case, it was done purely in concrete. But the challenge was, initially when we were doing these structures, we actually agreed with the client, and we had the budget to do it in double bend concrete structures. But the challenge actually came up when we had the budgets and everything in place. When they said like, no, your this thing is getting out of the budget because we don't want to build it up all in concrete, and it was a big thing for us. Then okay, how do we? Because it was doubly bent, then we went back to the drawing board and says that can we create something with one-way bending where we would use it as a masonry structure, because in our zone, unlike here, we are in earthquake zone 4, so it is even more challenging for us when we talk about the codes and everything, where we would want to push ourselves from the kind of frame control. So what we did was, these were, if you look at it, so it was predominantly a brick structure, all the big brick overhangs, and the skeleton, we adjusted it to a two-dimensional, like a kind of singly bended curves. So we had columns running through it, frames that were running through it, and holding up the entire structure. Because otherwise it would have been, when we were doing it initially, it would have been a kind of a wing in concrete. It would have been much more like lightweight, but to do this we had to change our design to adapt to it. And to hold it back to the structure, here we have kind of how the space behind it behaves, where it moves into it, and how it feels the flowingness of it, where you can see what is outside, the same time it feels something that is like more sculptural in nature. This is where we were, this is also an office project where we were doing it. So here we were looking to create certain geometries where we were trying to create a corner accentuation. So here we use simple curves based on where we wanted to have. It was more of a diffusion that was created, and we had this Verneuil that was the pattern. Because the whole idea of how we came up with the Verneuil was, it was for a company that was into highways and roads. So we were moved by how the continuity of roads and how we could interpret from a natural form. So it was more closer to a Verneuil. And these were, so even the office inside moves like a curves, like a flat, which is a mixture of flat lines and curves. And in this case, why flat lines and curves are also because of to optimize different ways of course, because when we have continuously curved, it is also like something that pushes away things in a different way. And here, what we were experimenting with was we could have a completely exposed concrete surface where it was completely left bare and it was grinded to perfection. So what you're seeing, that you can see the shuttering marks and everything that flows into it. And this is the corner perspective, because it is visible from almost 3 sides, and that's how it blends into it. And we have the entrance, that is, so it's how it blends into 2 materials, like where we have the brick cladding over in a continuous section of moving. So this is one project wherein where when we were pushing up our boundaries, where we could try to sort of bend those ribbons even further and probably to a different scale. So this was for the office that we built. So this was the house for him. He was a concrete enthusiast, and it was all about how we could make a very nice expression and bold fluid moving into it. So when we had the program laid out, we had terraces on the first floor, and the whole idea was how do we blend in the terraces and bring everything into like a sort of a fluidic form. So that was, so this is how when we look at it, because the whole front structure and the roof moves in completely, which is the front element, and the rear side wraps it, and the one that comes in. So it's like more like a ribbon sort of a structure that keeps flowing, and an unending sort of a ribbon that moves into it. And this was also like where at the same time we were looking at how we could, it was geothermally cooled, it was having double glazed walls, like insulated walls. And this was how it was being constructed on the inside, because some of them were the structural elements as well, so it was difficult to actually see things how, and many times when we had to get the curves right, we had to see things mostly at the side, and also to see things from a distance, because to get those curves right, it is also like a bit tricky when we see it. And this is the overall output of how it blends into it. This is our office that we recently built. So in this, so here we used like a kind of a surface which is parametrically flowing into it. So the whole idea of this was the tree that is in front of it, because being an industrial area, most people have cut off the trees that was initially planted. So we wanted to have it because it was a nice amalthas tree, and we wanted the facade to be like a sort of a shadow of what the tree would move into and how it would be shaped in. So that's the reason we have like this thing, how it sees on the outside, it is very transparent. At the same time, it is which has that fluidic character, because we have some terraces which we open up. At the same time, we have this nice thing that is being laid. And this is modeled, and this is built, and everything is being done parametrically. So these were certain ideas when we could, and this we could achieve a platinum certification for the kind of the building that we have done. It's first in Punjab, because there were no other offices that was doing LEED platinum. So in this was the flow that we wanted. These were a lot of initial studies that we wanted to be like dynamic, and at the same time, how would it be perceived? And these were how we could create things on the inside. And so these are the final output, where we have this central space that goes around, and then the facade which interacts. These are some of the projects which we are currently working on. This one, it's in Delhi. It's a samadhi, and this actually has double bend structures, and the double bend structures forms more like a kind of a petals, because it's a small space where you would want to be with yourself. So the idea what we were looking was like how could we create, like, because it was responsible for a particular kind of Jain community that was as a new religion which was around 400 years old. So this was very important for them to be the way, and now they're planning to do a lot of things around it. And in this, so this was, it always seems to be in a sense of motion. It's always gives you a sense of hug, because it the person home for it after life that we are building it was a person was like a mother to all, and that was the whole way that she has lived her life. And when we work with something like this, we always wanted, and the color and the gold lines are representative of the culture that we were responding to. So we had to go through the culture, understand, and particularly when are culturally sensitive, when you are not from that particular culture, it needs even more attention to go through it and to see what things, because 8 is a number that they value it the most, and that's how we have 8 petals, and we have this, it always feels that it's in a constant motion and a constant transformation. And even the flooring patterns have been evolved in that constant motion thing. So now we are in the process of cladding onto the outer surface with marble and with the kind of gold leafing that goes around. But this is the thing that has been done, casted, and it is coming out really well. So this is kind of a structure. And this is an interesting project. It's a political monument, and again we were responding to another culture. The culture here was Sikhism. And why we were responding to the culture? Because there was, when we were to get to this project, it was close to next to Gurdwara, and normally Gurdwaras have kind of a tall singular pole which has an like sword on the top. It's called Kandasa, which is the highest point of Gurdwara, and normally that is the highest point in the village as well. But here the challenge was we had to create a monument next to it, and so it was kind of tricky at the same time, that how could we respond So then initially when we had discussion, then and the client wanted because it's in because Punjab as a place, like it is being forced migration for over years, and because of the political turmoil and several other parameters. So when you go to the villages, there is not much of enthusiasm or inspiration that is left. So we wanted something that could, the idea of, because he was the first chief minister of Akali chief minister of Punjab. So his son wanted how a person from this village could have done so many things from here and was responsible for the country. He wanted to celebrate that part in the village. That was this huge monument with doubly twisted curves. But and when we actually made the Kandasa with the Gurudwara taller than this, and even at the top of it, we used the same cultural ideology to protect and to sensitize with the culture that is there. So here, the challenge is because we are building a twisted structure. The twisted structure was not challenging, but to build it to a scale of 250 feet, and it was completely mechanically engineered for the joints and everything fully built in steel, was something that was still we are working out with the fabricator, because the challenge is the scale. When it comes to the kind of margin of error it comes is pretty challenging. So it flows up because it has a different kind of curves, and even it has a circular ramp that goes up to about 80 feet high, and then you have the top tower in there. And we have an open air theatre, a congregation space, a walkway, then we have a resort that is coming next to it. And so this entire when we talk about, so here, even when we are, even now we are looking at certain tools where we can get those joineries done within the program itself, which will help us to do it. And this is again, we're doing something in Dubai where we are 3D printing the top clubhouse of it. It's a 8-story residential project. And when you talk about residential projects, when they're built onto small footprints, like normally we get to build mostly, is about how we could blend it onto the outside where it could be flown into it. So here, the idea was to, he wanted, and this is being, though it's written Dubai, it's being built in Sharjah. Sharjah is very conservative community compared to Dubai. So the idea was, it said, I want something new in Sharjah and something that is really different in a way that we could respond to. It's on a main street that goes into it. So this is how it is. It's like so when you talk about a lot of creativity within small to mid projects where yes, bigger projects get the bigger share of creativity. But that's where our interventions, where I've been trying to work in the last few years, and how we could do it. And that's when, and this is also something we are really exciting right now, which is working about, where one of a client who actually saw the ribbon house and said, what can you do beyond that? What can it be like? I give you 4 acres of land, you have this free-flowing things that is going all around. And he once said, okay, I want something that is more like the iconic house of Punjab. And that's when we were looking at it. And he really approved the design. This is the flow that we are working around, still figuring out a lot of things into it. But yes, we see that we could see through it, because not just about this, we also have to factor in Vastu and a lot of other parameters, and we get to see how we could do it. Thank you, that's it.